The nation chief responds to his predecessor. COVID numbers are back in the double digits, and a local nonprofit helps with rebuilding Abaco. Good evening, everyone. I'm Leah Cooper with your JCN News for this Friday, December 11th. Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis announces an additional 24 grants to residents of the Crossing Rocks community on Abaco. This brings the total title deeds and grants awarded to residents in this community to 80. In 2019, some 56 title deeds were transferred to residents of Crossing Rocks by the Ministry of the Environment and Housing. This figure represents more than 60% of the properties in Crossing Rocks, which were destroyed by Hurricane Floyd in 1999. The Prime Minister says for those patiently waiting to receive papers to their property, he's encouraging them to remain steadfast. He says he's advised that additional grants are being prepared and they too will be awarded to residents of Crossing Rocks. Dr. Minnis says today's award ceremony is a demonstration of the government fulfilling its commitment to grant government-owned land to Bahamians, including Crown land and land held by other government agencies. Under the Land and Grants Initiative, approximately 140 grants have been finalized for Bahamians. These grants are spread over Inagua, Crooked Island, Mayaguana, Eleuthera, Exuma, New Providence, Grand Bahama, and Abaco. Under his government, the Prime Minister says 2 60-acre parcels were transferred to the Disaster Reconstruction Authority to provide homes for approximately 400 residents in Wilson City and Marsh Harbor. An additional 49 lots were transferred to the Disaster Reconstruction Authority for the construction of homes in Central Pines. Additionally, he says the government is identifying additional land on Abaco, particularly in the Treasure Key area, Andros and Eleuthera, with other islands to follow. He says the government has been committed to this initiative of providing land grants to Bahamians, particularly within the Family Islands, since commencing this strategy. He says it has identified critical impediments to proceeding and clearing the backlog for Crown grant applications. This included a need to update the technical equipment and enlarge its human resources. Well, Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis responds to comments made by former Prime Minister Perry Christie, who yesterday called for the government and the opposition to work closely together. Dr. Minnis was quite frank in his response to questions from the media this morning when he said that former Prime Minister Christie is, quote, absolutely right about calling for unity between the government and the opposition, particularly when it comes to consultations on the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. The Prime Minister shared these thoughts on the sidelines of a tour of the Hurricane Hole redevelopment project on Paradise Island.
We have reached out on many occasions. The medical fraternity, that is the medical community, the grouping that's dealing with the pandemic, their presentation, we've invited the opposition to participate in the presentation at the same time as we were informed, which meant that they would have had just as much information as we would have, and they could have given their insight at that particular point in time. They refused to come. So I hope Mr. Christie would talk to them.
Now, on Wednesday, health officials reported 38 cases of coronavirus, the highest since mid-November, when 56 cases were reported in one day. Some have questioned the competent authorities' decision of relaxing some restrictions just ahead of the Christmas holidays, especially with health officials predicting another wave. Well, Dr. Minnis says this.
We knew and we had anticipated that we would see an increase at least 10 to 14 days after the, what's that big holiday you have in the U.S.? Thanksgiving holiday. And now we're seeing it's 10 to 14 days post, so we expect a slight increase because of the amount of Bahamians that would have traveled there. Obviously, some would have become infected. But we were prepared for it, and we would deal with it appropriately so as to avoid any form of third wave.
As the country continues its battle with this unpredictable virus, the nation's chief sends this message to his fellow Bahamians, particularly those hoteliers who only just returned to work yesterday after being home for close to 10 months.
The only thing I would say to those Bahamians that have returned to work to Atlantis, that are returning to Point, that are returning to Bahama, that they themselves must display some degree of discipline and responsibility. It means that you cannot work in an environment and then as you leave, just go party for all. You must be very responsible, being cognizant that you can possibly introduce infection into your work environment.
The United States and the Bahamas signing an updated search and rescue agreement. The binding United States Government of the Bahamas Aeronautical and Maritime Search and Rescue Agreement was signed just yesterday. After years of close cooperation, the United States Coast Guard, in coordination with the Departments of State and Transportation, including the Federal Aviation Administration, concluded the binding agreement, which serves as the basis for future bilateral cooperation and coordination of search and rescue operations off Southeast Florida, the Florida Straits, and the Bahamas, areas in which both the U.S. and the Bahamas are responsible for managing search and rescue services. In 2020 alone, joint search and rescue operations have assisted or saved over 200 lives at sea in or near the Bahamas and assisted or saved thousands over the past decade. The signing of this agreement is a monumentous event which advances the previous U.S.-Bahamas Search and Rescue Agreement, the Gray Agreement, into the 21st century, and it codifies the legacy search and rescue processes between our two countries. This agreement also sets the stage for future search and rescue cooperation between our two countries, providing the necessary framework for effective and efficient communication and coordination during life-threatening events. The provisions agreed upon in this critical document and the continued partnership between the U.S. and the Bahamas will improve the safety of life at sea, and will result in lives being saved in our shared region well into the future. Double-digit numbers of COVID-19, the first time in 6 days, being reported by the Ministry of Health for Wednesday. The Ministry of Health, in its update number 258, confirmed 38 cases of the virus, 20 cases on Grand Bahama, 7 of which, according to health officials, were on board a cargo vessel sailing in Bahamian waters near Grand Bahama, 15 on New Providence, 2 on Exuma, and 1 case on Bimini at Cat Key. Health officials say all those who tested positive for the virus on the cargo vessel have been isolated on the vessel, and none of its crew members were permitted to disembark. The 38 new cases bring the total in country to 7,623. 22 of the cases are males and 16 are females. Active cases now tally at 1,369, and with 11 recoveries reported on Wednesday, recovered cases now stand at 6,043. 14 cases are hospitalized, 13 considered moderately ill, while 1 case is in the intensive care unit at Doctors Hospital. 545 tests were completed on Wednesday, 490 negative results, 4 repeated tests, and 13 results were inconclusive. The death toll remains at 163. You're watching JCN News. Stay with us.